video supports the first lesson for the week of May 18th in the BCPS Secondary Reading Curriculum. The title of this lesson is Think Beyond the Text. I'm Nancy Perkins, a resource teacher in both the Offices of Secondary ELA and Title I. You may recall that in last week's lessons, you completed notes thinking charts like the one shown here after you read articles about the Tokyo Olympics. On these charts, you identified important information from the article and you paraphrased that information. You also recorded some of your personal thoughts you had while you were reading. This week, you will complete this same chart again, but you will add on a new layer. What's the big idea? After reading and considering the information that's presented, you will determine a big idea of the text. A big idea is a comment or a statement about society or life in general that can be made based on the information from the text. It is not stated directly in the text, but it is a conclusion that you can draw after reading and considering the information. Watch this next segment to see an example of how you read a text and then consider the information to come up with a big idea or a conclusion based on what you read. Let's take a look at a quick example of what is meant by drawing conclusions or stating bigger ideas reflected in a text. I have a brief article here called Doing Good for Gorillas. The first thing I have to do always is read the text and annotate it with my thinking. I've already done this, but let me review it quickly with you. Okay, the article again titled Doing Good for Gorillas. Addie Barrett from Germantown, Maryland has a favorite animal, the mountain gorilla. When she was in first grade, she read a book about mountain gorillas. Addie was surprised to learn that they're endangered because of poaching and habitat loss. She wanted to protect them. And you can see I highlighted that section there in my purple color to capture my thinking because I was thinking something. And over here you can see that my thought was, wow, she was really young to make a big decision like that, like wanting to help gorillas. Continuing to read, that's why Addie started Gorilla Heroes. The group raises money for animals with lemonade stands and a gorilla gala. A gala is like a big fancy party. So that made me think all kinds of things. So I highlighted that again in purple, and my comments over here. First of all, I was thinking, wow, they were really creative ways for a kid to raise money for a cause that she believed in. And then I was thinking that I've seen those lemonade stand fundraisers set up at our local grocery store before, maybe not necessarily for gorillas, but for other causes. And I was also thinking, well, as a kid, she must have gotten help from other kids and also adults to be able to organize the lemonade stands and also a big party to put something like that on. She would have needed some help. Addie's now 12 years old. So far, Gorilla Heroes has raised more than $11,000 for the Dion Fossey Gorilla Fund and the Ellen Fund. And I just highlighted $11,000 there, and you can see my thinking was, wow, that's a lot of money. Why does Addie care so much about mountain gorillas? She says it's because the species is so remarkably intelligent and shares many of the same emotions that we do. She adds, the feeling of making a positive impact on the world is like no other. It feels so good that I'm making a difference. And I captured those lines there, and my thinking was, oh, she's a really smart, organized, and caring girl, caring young lady to put so much effort into caring for the gorillas. There's a little picture of her. Okay, so after I read the article, I completed the same notes thinking chart that we used in last week's lesson. So I wrote all of my thinking that I was doing while I was reading down here in the right-hand column. Then I went back to the text and determined the important details that I wanted to remember about Addie and her commitment to the gorillas, and I divided them into these line chunks. Then, in the middle column, I paraphrased the information that was on those lines. I took what was there in the text and put it into my own words that are actually shorter than what's in the text, but I still captured the important details. All the same skills that we used in the last lesson. But now, here's the new piece for this week. When I finished the notes thinking chart, I went back and reviewed the information, paying close attention to my own thinking. My own thoughts and questions help me to determine the bigger ideas about life or society that are reflected in the article. I think, what idea about life was the author trying to show me with the details in this article? It's actually a lot like determining a theme in a story, if you've been doing that in your ELA classes. So, at the bottom of my notes thinking chart, I came up with some of these bigger ideas that I thought were reflected in the text. So I came up with, even young people can make a difference in the world if they're motivated and work hard. Having a passion about something can lead a person to do great things. Follow through on creative ideas can lead to big payoffs. And mountain gorillas are an endangered species that need protection and support from humans to survive. So as you can see, I came up with several bigger ideas or conclusions that I could draw for this text, just as examples to show you. In your work this week, you will only be required to come up with one bigger idea or conclusion that you can draw for the articles that you read. So, let's see how you can do with these skills with this week's articles. Hopefully, you now have at least a little idea of the type of thinking you will be doing during this week's lessons. To get ready to read the first article for this week, take a look at this picture. As you can see, this is Jackie Robinson. Think for a few seconds about what, if anything, you know about him. You may have thought of some of these points. He was the first African American to play Major League Baseball. He played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. During his baseball career, he endured many racial slurs from fans during the game. The great thing about him was that he endured this unfair treatment with grace and dignity and without fighting back. He was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, and that was in 1962. If you thought of some of these points, that's great. If you didn't, that's okay, because now you have heard these important facts about Jackie Robinson. But this week, you will not be reading about Jackie Robinson. You will be reading about this man. Do you recognize him? Can you tell anything about the sport that he played? This is Willie O'Ree, the first African American to play Major League Ice Hockey. To prepare for your work for this lesson, have the article Willie O'Ree, the Jackie Robinson of Hockey was Builder of the Game, and the notes thinking chart for this article in front of you. Watch this next segment to see a model of a reading of the first portion of the article. Here's the article that you're going to be reading in this week's lesson. It's titled, Willie O'Ree, the Jackie Robinson of Hockey was Builder of the Game. And as you know, the first thing you always do is you take your article and read through it and capture your thinking. What kind of questions, thoughts, ideas are coming to you as you're reading. I've done this for the first section of this article, so I want to read through it with you and show you some of the things that I was thinking. First thing I do is I look at this nice picture and read the caption. Willie O'Ree spent years after retirement from pro hockey working with kids interested in the sport. Most kids know about Jackie Robinson, the first African American player in Major League Baseball. But my guess is that most kids don't know about Willie O'Ree. He was the first black player in the National Hockey League, or NHL. He has an amazing story, and I highlighted in purple that Willie O'Ree was the first black player in the NHL, and my comment was, I didn't know this, I hadn't heard of him before. O'Ree was born in the Canadian province of New Brunswick in 1935. A province is similar to a state. One of 13 children, O'Ree started playing ice hockey almost as soon as he could walk. He was a very good amateur player. But at age 19, O'Ree was hit by a puck that broke his nose and cheekbone. Players did not wear helmets and face guards like they do today. Even worse, O'Ree lost most of his vision in his right eye, And I captured that information about that injury because I was feeling that for him. And I said, oh no, this injury must have been so painful and scary. If you've ever been to a hockey game, you know those pucks fly really fast. So I just can't even imagine what that felt like to be hit in the cheekbone with that. 2 history-making games. O'Ree wanted to keep playing, so he didn't tell anyone that he was almost blind in one eye. He kept moving up through hockey's minor leagues, and I captured those sentences, and my thinking was, well, that's pretty amazing that he could play so well even though he couldn't see right. Finally, he made history by appearing in 2 NHL games for the Boston Bruins in 1958. O'Ree also played much of the 1960-61 season for the Bruins. That year, he scored 4 goals and earned 10 assists. This means that he helped another player score a goal. O'Ree did not return to the NHL after 1961, but he had a long career in the minor leagues. Remember, for most of O'Ree's career, the NHL had only 6 teams. Because of this, some very good players were stuck in the minors. And my comment there, you can see I highlighted all the information about his career. And I said he had a pretty good career in hockey considering the time period, the point being only 6 major league teams, so not many players got to play in the majors. After he stopped playing, O'Ree spent decades working with young hockey players across North America. In November, O'Ree was voted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. He was named a Builder of the Game. And I captured the sentence about him working with the young players, and my comment, he must be a very kind-hearted man to spend years giving back to the youth hockey players. Okay, so you know your job now is to finish reading the article and annotate it with what you're thinking. Now, watch this segment to see an explanation of completing the notes thinking chart in order to determine a big idea for the article. Here's the notes thinking chart that you're going to complete after reading about Willie O'Ree. I've already filled in the information for the section that I read, so if you take a look at it, just as a reminder of how we complete the chart, in the right-hand column, we just list all of the things that we were thinking as we were reading, and I've done that here for that first section that I read. Then if we jump over to the first column, the left-hand column, this is where we identify lines from the text that contained information that we think are important to remember. So I chunked the lines this way for that section that I read. And then in our middle section here, we paraphrase the information that was on those lines. So you can see that I've done that here. Okay, and remember, this was the information that I thought was important to remember about that section of the text. The sections that you're going to paraphrase are not going to be this long, so don't get scared when you see how much is here, but this was all the information about his career, so I just all put it together like this. I've already identified the sections of the article that I believe contain important information for you to remember, so you won't have to worry about that. You just have to go back and look at what's on these lines and paraphrase that information. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is complete your chart for the thinking that you were doing and capturing what you think is important. And then remember, when you finish that, here's the meat of this lesson. We come down here. Now when you look at everything you learned in that article and the thinking that you were doing, what a big idea or a conclusion that you can draw about an issue that you think is represented in this text? What was the author showing you, the big idea kind of about life that you got from this text? Okay, finish that and then be sure to submit your completed chart to your teacher. So, remember, authors are often sharing information that reflects a bigger idea when they write. Good readers are able to consider the information that is shared in the text, and then they are able to take a step back to think about what's the big idea.